11 work. On a daily basis, we get feedback on how these bookmarks help individuals to get through some of their situations. I have to say, many of the parties that I've had in these intractable conflict situations report that they're using them. I spoke with one last night who said that he keeps these bookmarks in his kitchen cabinet, and at night he goes home and takes a look at them to see if he can use any more tips in dealing with some of the situations in that department. We've developed 12 messages, and we've been refunded by the James Foundation to create another 12. Our challenge as scholars, practitioners, and experts in areas focused on ways to understand and manage humiliation is to create the simple messages and then to share them widely with others in language that they understand. I actually brought bundles of these, so I'm just going to pass them, and you can take a look at some of the simple messages. The one on top of all of these packages is one that says, try to understand others, recognize differences, acknowledge another's feelings, put yourself in the other person's shoes, and it's a ballerina in Timberland boots doing the role reversal. So I'll pass the bundles to pass out. So you can, if you'd like more, we actually have hundreds of thousands of these to distribute. We are distributing them literally. We have sent them around the world. If you would like some for your program,
past president of the Institute of Medicine at the National Academy of Sciences. He's a member of the Human Dignity and Humiliation Studies Global Advisory Board. He has served as the president and then chairman of the board of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Dr. Hamburg will be speaking to us about humiliation and education. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. David Hamburg.
Can you hear me? If need be, I'll sing. You've been excellent at time but I appreciate that, especially for receiving speakers. Now, I developed a great interest in the Cuban Missile Crisis. It probably changed my whole life. During my 15 years as president of the Carnegie Foundation, we sponsored conferences on the Cuban Missile Crisis, first in the U.S. and then in Russia and then in Cuba. And it was horrifying how close we came to the nuclear war. That's not my point. My point is I learned a lot about the habits of Mr. Castro, and he is in the habit of making speeches about 3 hours in duration. And he would say to me that what I have to say is less important if you don't I will pay attention to your messages, but I don't intend to go on. I want to first thank Ellen. She's really extraordinary. The stimulating effect she's had in clarifying humiliation as a really central concept. All of us are concerned about human relations, especially about human conflict. And she's had a wonderful stimulating effect on research, education, and practice of humiliation issues throughout the world. And we see some of that in this meeting. It's a very diverse meeting, people from different fields and different countries. It's been a very stimulating day, so I tell them my deep gratitude to you. I'll come at the same problems that the other had, but from a different angle. The concepts are similar, I think, a different angle. My focus is education, and I'm deliberately, this time, avoiding the most extreme situations. This morning, I talked briefly about prevention of genocide, which is my current obsession. But I want to talk about a much more common and lesser form of humiliation, that which occurs more or less normally, usually, in schools in this country and in, I think, most countries of the world. Unfortunately, indeed tragically, in all parts of the world, there are ample occasions for children and adolescents to experience humiliation in the course of their development. We are all familiar in one way or another with discrimination. Discrimination by age, by class, by gender, by religion, by ethnicity, by nationalism, and other criteria that may readily become a depreciated outcome. Early adolescence, say 10, 12, 13 years of age, is particularly important in that respect, because it involves a major transition from being a child to somehow, someday becoming an adult. A great deal of high-risk exploratory behavior. Exploratory behavior of this developmental phase often leads to difficulties in which the individual feels demeaned, appreciated, indeed humiliated. I'm not going to stick to early adolescence, it's just a vivid example. But the problem is ubiquitous in education. Our great challenge in democratic societies is to organize educational institutions and experiences in such a way as to minimize lasting danger from transient humiliating episodes. In this way, the harsh reaction patterns, such as intense anger or even violence-prone reactions, may be minimized by finding buffers of resilience, self-worth, and mutually respectful human relations, if we play our cards right as educators and decent human beings. We need to be mindful of the danger of deep psychological scars in the long term if we do not take prompt action to provide more constructive patterns in education. Can you hear me all right? Or do you want me to sing? Can you hear me all right?
A little louder then, back in the back. I know we're trying to clear that area outside, so we'll try to take care of that and that will help. So a little bit louder.
The ever-present worldwide problem of invidious distinctions between in-groups and out-groups can be buffered or minimized with respect to humiliating experiences. To do so, the schools at every level, from early childhood to young adulthood, must build in a strong sense of responsibility for their students. Parents, teachers, and principals may do a great deal of constructive work along these lines. To address the humiliation problem adequately requires several systematic measures. One, the structure of the school, which I'll explain in a minute. Two, the content of education, in which Martin Deutsch has been a pioneer, education for conflict resolution and violence prevention. Number three, the bases for self-esteem. Number four, nonviolent, active coping strategies, taking advantage of opportunities without injuring self or others. 5, learning from the terrible history of the damage humans have done to each other, I would say especially in the form of genocides, as an essential educational experience and to provide both a moral and pragmatic basis for dealing with other dangers in other groups on the basis of understanding, fairness, and mutual benefit. This paper offers only a sketch based on research as to how these measures may be implemented. One source of insight into these matters comes from decades of research in social psychology and related fields on racial prejudice in the United States and ways to reduce such prejudice. And I may say Columbia University has been perhaps the great pioneer in this field. In this context, a great deal of work has been done on desegregation in the United States by pioneering investigators such as our own great Martin Deutsch. In a classic study, he examined 2 New York City public housing units undergoing desegregation. In one, families were assigned apartments at random without regard to race. In another, blacks and whites were assigned to separate buildings. A subsequent survey showed that those in the desegregated housing were much more likely to favor interracial living than were those in the other arrangement. The experience of human contact had diminished negative stereotypes. Not eliminated them, but diminished them significantly. Clearly the problem is complicated, and desegregation alone does not produce. Some families were assigned apartments at random without regard to race. In another, blacks and whites were assigned to separate buildings. A subsequent survey showed that those in the desegregated housing were much more likely to favor interracial living than were those in the other arrangement. The experience of human contact had diminished negative stereotypes. Not eliminated them, but diminished them significantly. Clearly the problem is complicated, and desegregation alone does not produce strong results. So what then are the conditions under which desegregation does in fact reduce prejudice between groups? Putting together a great deal of laboratory and field research from several fields of the behavioral sciences, it appears that the quantitative amount of contact